Hello and welcome back to another episode of New Game Plus. This week talking about video game media. So we had a conversation with a guest a while back that touched at one point a little bit on media, and we sort of talked a little about this sort of moment in like 2006 where things were shifting a little. And we thought, you know what? Why don't we talk a bit about video game journalism, because it seems like it's something that people care way too much about. So my hot take. So why don't we dive in a little bit? And I thought we could start just a touch with talking about where the shit did this come from? Like, where did video game journalism even start? And from my recollection, and obviously this isn't some highly researched, very professional look at where it started, which you can go to YouTube if you want that. But in my sort of like knowledge, even for myself, like video game journalism, for the most part, basically began as kind of like print to ads, pretty much, you know, like it was essentially, it was mostly companies kind of like getting people to sort of talk about their product, and it really wasn't journalism per se, you know, like it was more just kind of advertising dressed up a little bit as journalism.
Industry press almost.
Yeah.
And before we go any further, I have to say I love that it was an almost ASMR-esque introduction from you this time.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. I love it.
I figure New Game Plus should be a cozy experience, right? Where you get to
a bit more intimate.
Yeah. But I agree with you. And like I actually like, honestly, no real shade on industry press sometimes for me. Like, Nintendo Power was industry press. Like, that was made to sell things, and I loved it because it very much did make me buy things, and I loved those magazines. I was like, kind of miss the days when they had to put that much effort into making me buy shit for them.
I feel that, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it would also get like, you know, there would be coverage in, say, like trade, like electronic trades kind of magazines. Like it wasn't really its own thing, right? Like I feel like video games were sort of picked up willy-nilly. Like maybe a newspaper would cover if CES was happening or something. Maybe you'd get a newspaper covering the next big trend. And the most that like games would sort of hit into the mainstream was when there was some kind of controversial topic, right? Because that's kind of how at least American sort of Western media kind of runs. It's like controversial topics are sort of the bread and butter because that creates discussion, right? I don't think that's controversial to say, right? At least that's from my perspective. But I'm curious, Paula, what was it like? What's it like in Chile, actually? Like Spanish language.
So the funny thing is, from what I can remember is like video games never really broke like into the mainstream. Like all the stuff like I've seen like on YouTube where I don't know Pokemon Satanic and stuff like that, it never really like mattered here. Like I don't remember a single instance of a video game like being like front and center or like even like a little bit of an addendum like in a newspaper or something like that. On the other hand, we did have a magazine called Club Nintendo, or like Nintendo Club, if you want to call it that, where, well, it was mainly about then the upcoming releases for Nintendo, or like if there was like an E3 event, like a little bit of coverage on that. And mainly stuff like that. I do remember being like a reader's column where like the readers could send like a letter or something like that. I actually have a couple of them. I couldn't find them like to properly talk about them on this recording. But I do remember liking them a lot as a kid, and I actually learned about other games like Bayonetta that I couldn't even fathom they existed at the time. Like, oh, what is this? I actually have Bayonetta 1 and 2 for the Wii U. I haven't like played them yet, but I learned about them through that magazine.
Nice. Well, yeah, magazines were the big thing for a long time, right? Like, I mean, you had your EGMs. There's like PC Gamer. There's holy shite. There's so many. Like, I don't even want to like go through.
We still have a few. Edge is still going strong in the UK, for example.
And there's been resurgences. Like, for instance, I've been like on Kickstarter. There's been Ninty Fresh, which has been creating. I think they're actually based in the UK, and they've been wonderful. It's basically like Nintendo Power, except like they're not.
The pun work suggests UK based for sure.
Yeah, and like, and also like I think there's a lot of criticism often like lobbed at those early gaming magazines, and maybe even still today, that they were very much just kind of like, you know, these fronts for gaming companies to kind of launch a ship, but like also like that was kind of at a necessity, because like no one gave a shit about games outside of the niche like gaming culture, right? And so like to actually get information on a game, especially back then, and like we have to remember this is before the days of like you know, digital distribution, and so like to get a fucking screenshot for your magazine, you sometimes had to take photos of the screen, right? Like it's like it was that insane.
Yeah.
And so like they were just relying on what the hell these companies could give them, right? Like it was like they're doing the best they can, right? And then you're also on that like questionable like area of like, especially in those days of like, if you're too hard on a game, like I still want them to give us stuff so we can keep showing things. So it's like there's like a weird balancing act at that time, you know.
And I think that speaks to sort of how things changed, because they're from memory, and again, none of us have done even the modicum of preparation that really we should have done.
I did a little bit, but
like this. But like there were a few moments that sort of signposted the development of that. So you have the original Keely Doritos and Mountain Dew Halo promotion thing. How that guy still has any credibility in the industry is beyond me. But you know, that was an important thing, because I think that's sort of the first documented time where that kind of advertising oversight and hand controlling things was first a big problem. Then you have the whole Kane and Lynch controversy that was sort of the catalyst for the creation of Giant Bomb as a website. And I think it's hugely relevant that a lot of these moments were in the digital space.
Yeah.
Because I think, weirdly enough, games becoming more of a serious entity and an entity that could be discussed in more depth than product is releasing, consume product, here are key product points, came with dedicated online journalism, where the business model sort of was flipped on its head, because you no longer needed to justify printing 200 pages a month. You could be more on the pulse of things as they were happening.
Yeah. And you had this shift from you also had like people who grew up with games now being at the point where they were so literate in games that like they could really break them down and like really look at them, you know? And like arguably that's what the magazine rise was. Like there was a lot of those people in that time who were like they were so literate in games that they could do this. Because when they first popped around, I mean, they were really lobbied in the same world of toys, right? Like that was like very much the industry that they were in, right? They were the toy industry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like there's like that major shift that occurs. I also had to laugh a little bit too, though. Like so many times these ad things, like you see all these people getting mad at these ads, and then like they hop over to YouTube and like watch their favorite YouTuber fucking talk about Raid Shadow Legends, and I was like, you guys don't give a shit. I'm like, I was like, YouTubers make some of the most egregious advertisements for fucking horrible games that I've ever seen, and we're just like, it's fine. And I was like, bro, that is the worst shit out there. Like those mobile games are trash. And listen, make your money how you want to make your money. But let's not pretend that those are honest advertisements.
Gaming YouTube could be a whole other New Game Plus.
I know, my God.
I feel like there's so much to dig into on that.
Twitch is like one big advertisement. It's incredible. Like it's great.
And I mean, this is where some of the magazine space has moved away, because you know, big developers and publishers aren't looking for previews in magazines anymore. Not really. Not for the big stuff where they want to get the big hits. They are looking for strategic partnerships with streamers. They are looking for good coverage and engagement and SEO day one. Dr. Disrespect, who's one of the biggest faces in game streaming, has set up a company specifically to bring together streamers and game publishers and developers. That's where people have moved, and it's understandable why, because there's something different to having a specific connection with someone who you can hear, you know exactly what their tastes are, you can see the gameplay in real time. Well, not maybe sometimes in real time. Anyway, you can understand why it's gone that way. Ultimately, you get some of the best and some of the worst content that way.
Yeah.
It is what it is, but I think there's something to be said for the long form side of that stuff specifically. Where someone could dig in for 45 minutes into Lisa, a painful RPG, for example, and go really in depth, I suppose, in a way that we would like to pretend that we can do in this cobbled together podcast.
Yeah.
But I think there's some merit to that, and I think that speaks to the development of media coverage and the maturation of media coverage.
Yeah, so this is, I think, an interesting point that, like, I'm glad you sort of brought up. Sorry, Paula, do you want to add something? We're already going off.
Not right now. I'm quite interested where it is going, because I have like a couple of points to make later.
Perfect.
Because I wasn't really exposed to video game like journalism like growing up until like the age of YouTube pretty much, and whenever I got like my own laptop, so I could actually watch stuff.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit. Yeah, this is good. So like, I like this jumping off that you've done here to Rick, where it's like talking about the rise of kind of YouTube, because YouTube arguably is games media, right? Like there's very much, there are all these YouTubers who do these deep dives, which are really satisfying, but like that's one segment, right? And then there's the other segment of games media that I genuinely think gets really unfairly like just shat on all the time. Like talking Kotaku's and like IGN's like, oh, the amount of fucking hatred that gets lumped onto IGN, I do not understand. Well, I mean, I do understand. I know where it's coming from, because it's coming from a small minority of gamers. Like, God Christ, don't get me started. We're going to talk a little bit about Gamergate here, because like there's this. Remember,
So actually, yeah, I pulled the face and then I was like, hang on, that is actually just definitionally media and games journalism.
It is, yeah, Gamergate, right?
It is.
Yeah, it starts everything. So, little story time here. When I was young, I remember coming onto the internet around the time of like, I was like a young little atheist who was like, I would watch some shit, and I remember watching like those fuckers who, God, don't watch them now, but like Amazing Atheists, like those kind of dudes, because I was an edgelord at the time, right? I'm a little kid who's like, oh yeah, but I was watching it. What? Fuck you. God damn it. But I actually remember when I started to think like, I think this guy's full of shit, was around the time when this was starting, because they all just started piling on to like Anita Sarkeesian so hard, and I was like, okay, I don't know if. I was like, why is everyone hating this person so much? Like, it was like, do you know what I mean? Like, I was seeing it. I was like, I don't really understand. But like, sorry, this is going to go into a few areas, but like.
I have a hot take on Gamergate and I'm just waiting to drop it. So you keep going.
Yeah. Cause this whole thing of like ethics of journalism, like that was never the point. Like there's no like it's such a dog whistle, right? Like it just didn't make any sense. Like it was like, I think, Super Bunny Hop and I think a few others have done like really good deep dives into how like this was just complete ridiculousness. Actually, Innuendo Studios does a phenomenal series on like what the fuck Gamergate was and like just the kind of ridiculousness behind it that is like really, really good. And like shows point for point why anyway, it's very good stuff. But the thing that I think we see so often get lumped at like games journalists all the time is like there's this thing of where it's like, oh, they're not really gamers, or like they're not very good, or like they're not really going in depth on this thing, and it's all sort of cursory. But like, man, they're covering everything. Like that's not what their purpose is. Their purpose is to
and it's super interesting that you say that now, because literally 48 hours ago at the time of recording, there was a video interview with the current editor-in-chief of Kotaku, and they, for whatever you think of that individual and the person that did the
Oh, is that the one with
interviews,
Alana
it's besides
Pierce?
the point. It was indeed, yeah.
Yes.
So they literally made the exact point, like, there will be people who know the game better than you because that's their thing. That's what they play. When your job is to cover 20 different games a week, it is going to be a shallow ocean versus a really fucking deep pond. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the intersection with YouTube is super interesting, because you will find people whose whole thing, they can like carve out a niche and do journalism, media, that sort of thing on a specific game or subset. And I think if that's what you're looking for from a broad website, you are partly at fault for the fact that your expectations are not being met because you came in with the wrong expectations.
It's like bad media literacy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like,
yeah.
It's like, what is like a site like IGN Kotaku for? Like, I'm not going to this shit. Like, occasionally they'll post really wonderful op-eds, and those are really cool. And like, that's like interesting stuff. Like, they've done some cool one. Yeah.
But that, I suppose there is also a wrinkle where actually those websites used to be what you went to that thing for. Websites like IGN used to hire specific staff to write guides for games.
Oh, they still do.
Right. So it's also bad media literacy, but it's also a growing pain, I suppose, in the development of the media landscape.
But I guess that's
if I can be a little bit wanky about it.
Yeah, that's fair. But I also think like no one ever complains about IGN guides. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like people just use
They
them.
are shit. Like, outside of the 2 or 3 games, they are not great.
Yeah, I mean,
there was a period where they were really good. There's the odd one nowadays, but generally speaking,
really, I'd actually kind of disagree. I've been finding that, especially for newer games, their guides are like really spot on. Like, they go really fucking into it. Like, that's where I learned about the Psychonauts thing. Like the little like the special trick, it was fucking IGN games. They were like, yo, do this, and I was like, oh, thank you. Like, that kind of deal. So I don't know, but that's just me though. I mean, because GameFAQs, there was that, and then it's like they sort of took over in that sort of world. But anyway, sorry, Paula, you were gonna
probably case by case thing. We are getting a little bit sidetracked.
Yeah,
I was thinking like, I was thinking like how you have like the big like media or like the big video game like outlets that cover or review games, and I remember I can't remember like which Otome game it was, but I remember the Otome community being not happy of how it was covered by this video outlet. I think it was Silicon Era. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was. I don't remember like the whole drama around it. Like, I pretty much like read the article. It's like, oh, this is bad. Bye. And that got me thinking. Like, we do have like a ton of independent reviewers like reviewing specifically the Otome genre, and that happens like with other with all kinds of games, that you have like people reviewing like very specific kind of games. So even if we have like the big outlets that people like to hate on, we have options. It's not like
and more than that,
back in the day, we have options.
More than that, arguably in that context, IGN and Kotaku and the like are a gateway in.
Yeah,
because if you're John Doe on the street, and you want to know if the game's going to be good for you, you're probably in a similar boat to someone who's playing a bit of everything, in the sense that you've not got super deep knowledge on anything. And then once you try different things and you do, then you're naturally going to seek out people in your community, whether that's Otome, whether that's, whatever. And I think in that sense, it's important to see the utility that they have to bring new people in, because it is a more accessible, open sort of entry point.
Yeah, and it's too, like, I think there's such a value to that, like, almost generalist perspective on a game, like the fact that, because like I need sometimes when I see, like, for instance, if there's a game that's from a really niche genre and you go to look up the reviews and they're all like 9 out of 10s and they all happen to be from websites that cover this niche genre, it's like, a 9 out of 10 for people who are immersed in a specific niche might not be a 9 out of 10 for the general audience. Do you know what I mean?
Because there'll be blind
It's
spots
true.
and biases and expectations. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and so that's why, like, we need all these things. We need our, like, IGNs and Kotakus. We need our, like, fucking Jason Schreiers doing deep dives into the industry. We need our YouTube community. You know, like, I actually think, you know, there's so much hate lobbied at this is why I do feel lovely that, like, the community and How Long to Beat is so nice, because it feels sort of like this little, I don't know, maybe because it's just about beating games, you know, like, when you come to the community, there isn't, there just doesn't feel like much rancor at all, and maybe that's also due to good moderation, but, like, you go on some of these big websites, and it's just like, even that Alana Pierce one, I remember I clicked on it, I haven't finished that video yet, but, like, that thing was getting so many dislikes right away, and I was like, what the fuck, guys? Like, just watch it and listen first. Like, holy crap, you know? I don't know. Maybe that's just part of internet living and, like, being such a big entity. Like, maybe that's just what happens when you're in such a huge sort of community. I don't know. But sorry, Rick, you had a hot take on Gamergate, didn't you?
Yeah, so it's sort of a two-parter. Firstly, I think everyone involved in that situation comes out looking like shit. So the guy who originally, like, leaked the conversations and the situation with his private life with Zoe Quinn, like, so to give people who have no idea of what Gamergate is, the most neutral take I can possibly give. Gamergate started with a game developer by the name of Zoe Quinn, who'd done something on Twine. I forget the specifics of the game. That game had coverage by a Kotaku reporter. Something like that, yeah. Depression Quest. Quest, that's it. Game, yeah. The game actually is like the least significant part of this story.
Yeah,
it was given coverage by a Kotaku journalist, I believe by the name of Nathan Grayson. That individual did not disclose that he had a relationship of some description with Zoe Quinn. Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend alleged that it was of a sexual nature, and that also covered 4 other people involved in the gaming industry. So,
which turns out that ex-boyfriend was a stalker and had, like,
right.
Like,
okay,
yeah.
So fuck that guy for a lot of reasons, but principally because that wasn't the way to make that disclosure. Like, because what you're doing is using the shield of, oh, this is corruption in the press, to air your dirty laundry, basically. Fuck Nathan Grayson, because that is absolutely something he should have disclosed if he's covering those games. And that's his fuck up as a journalist.
Yeah, but it turns out there was no ethical breach whatsoever anyway, because it wasn't even like a review or anything at all. It was just like, it wasn't even like coverage of that specific game, which was a free game.
Yeah, my personal view is that you should always disclose those kind of relationships, irrespective. And this is where I think this is my second hot take, is that Gamergate actually broad brushes a force for good. Because, and I never noticed this before, I regularly notice this now, outlets will disclose when they've been given a free copy, what kind of event they've gone to. I think those things are important for you to know going into a review. And I think that is something that, as a consequence of that, and it was a clusterfuck, but as a consequence of that, the landscape is better, because those disclosures are just an expected part of it. That's my hot take.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, in general, like I said, I highly recommend the Innuendo Studios one on it. Because I'm not sure if that was necessarily a consequence from it, but yeah, everyone looks bad in it because there are some the people who spearheaded the, like, campaign of Gamergate are, like, trash. Like, it was just some trash, at least trash actors. Like, I can't comment on, like, human beings as, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to go out and be like, they're just the bottom of the earth, but, like, the actions they took were just terrible. Like, it was just harassing. And I think that's the problem. Like, I think you're right. Like, the idea, like what you said, like, that outcome is a good part of it, but the part that is really shit is just, like, the fucking doxing and attacks on Anita Sarkeesian and on, like, all of these women in gaming. And that was the big issue, right? It's like, that's what it spiraled into. It spiraled into this, like, major attack on, like, a number of women in gaming and games journalism. And, like,
yeah, the irony being that Sarkeesian's career thrives on that.
Not really, man. That girl had so many death threats.
No. I'm not saying it's a good thing. What I mean is that if you are an individual who dislikes that person and what they do, whether it's her, whether it's anyone else, you are doing, I suppose, your own stated aim damage by making a big deal out of it, because there's an extent to which any publicity is good publicity.
Right, yeah.
And if no one had kicked off about it, we probably wouldn't know who Anita Sarkeesian is. The fact is we do, and she and some of the work that she's done is essentially, immortalized by that controversy.
Yeah.
So it's just stupid all around.
Yeah, although I would say that, like, I know there are some, like, I totally, like, yeah, I get what you're saying. I think in this situation, though, like, there are some cases where, yeah, this stuff happens and it becomes publicity and you get good things, but, like, nothing good fucking came out of it for her in this one, like...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
No, I know. Yeah, it's just what I mean. Anyway, sorry. But Paula, why don't you share your thoughts? It's just two dudes talking about misogyny in fucking video games. But
yeah, like, I actually had to go into Google, like, to know what the fuck we were talking about, because, again, I'm a bit out of the loop with this one.
Well, I mean, we can move on from Gamergate, because Gamergate is just like a tiny speck in the media coverage discussion. So let's not dwell any longer that we need.
She actually came to my university to talk.
Huh, small world.
So you just go, yeah, I didn't even realize that. I guess I missed it, but yeah, there it is. She did a thing called "I Am Tired" during Gender-Based Violence Prevention Week. So there you go. Anyway, yeah, it's just one small part of it, but like, just note that, like, I guess the thing I want to say is, like, there are valid critiques to be made of, like, journalism and of media and whatnot. And it's just like, I feel as though, especially within gaming, there have been a lot of piggybacking on something that is legitimately something to talk about, and then using it to, like, fuel just, like, misogyny most of the time, which...
Well, I mean, you see that in anything, anywhere. A good cause and message will essentially be piggybacked on by the nuttiest people from the most extreme sides of any debate, because that's seen as an in. Not necessarily intentionally, in the sense that there's some grand conspiracy to pick the movement apart, but just because, if you're that fervent about an issue, you're looking for an in.
Yeah.
So it's something you just always have to be guarded by. Broad brush, I'd like to think that things are improving. Things are getting better all the time. I think things are moving in a positive direction. And I think that's maybe an opportunity to pull back to what we talked about. And I think what we all sort of agreed was the sort of pivotal point around the 06, 07, 08 era, sort of in the middle of 360 PS3 Wii, where things really did start to be discussed. And I think from there right through to Infinite, because I think for me, where things really kicked off in terms of deeper discussion was Bioshock Infinite and all the discussion around ludonarrative dissonance. Because I think that was, and maybe this is a personal bias, because for me, I think that was certainly a watershed in terms of, not realizing that games had stories and were more than, like, walk from left to right, shoot bad guy, win game. But in terms of really thinking about it a little bit more, because that was a real moment where everyone was talking about, well, does the gameplay of a game need to match the story that it's telling? If not, why not? If so, is that a rule that you can break to effect? And I think games have done that since. Spec Ops is a great example where the ludonarrative dissonance is sort of the point, for fear of, like, spoiling too much of that game. Yeah, I mean, what do you two think about that? I think I don't know that I had any more to say beyond it than that.
I'm trying to think, because when I got access to YouTube, like, the one thing, like, I mainly look out for, at the time I was playing Warcraft 3, so I pretty much look for competitive strategies for that game at the time. Though at some point I started, like, getting into playthroughs, and that pretty much, like, got me into half of the games I play right now.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, because, like, I think you're onto something there too, Rick. Like, I think that was and probably for us, it's a moment that was watershed because of our ages, right? Like that was when we were also
Sure.
turning into like, like recognizing like the deeper meanings behind games and like and other narratives. And I also think that like we've sort of been dancing around this, but I think if we even like sort of define the current state a little bit, it's like you've got generalized media that sometimes produces deeper discussions in terms of your big sites. You've got your like playthroughs and whatnot, which have also turned into like Twitch, right? Like playthroughs on there. And then you've got like, you know, your deep dives on YouTube. And I feel like together they create like a pretty healthy ecosystem. And admittedly, it's so far flung. And like, I mean, we can't talk about media coverage without talking about my Lord and Savior, James Stephanie Sterling, because like Sterling's shit is just great. I mean, they're just kind of like saying what needs to be said most of the time, but also like arguably, you know, they're taking down on loot boxes, taking down on all of this shit. But like, also, I know that realistically, there's just going to be media outlets who don't like care about loot boxes, like because there are just like, you know, there's people of just like across political spectrums working in media, right? And maybe this is something to like hit on a bit. Oh, back to politics again, but not too inflammatory way. But like, I just think that in general, like maybe it's also because America produces so much for the English speaking media, and like they're so politically like divided that like there's a real intense desire for media and for I think for games media to I don't know, to like subscribe to your views, you know? Is this sort of making sense? This is maybe still piggybacking a little bit on the Gamergate thing, and like just from what I see from like the way people receive articles and whatnot, or the way they critique games media right now, that there's kind of this like, I want you to be more on this side of things, or I want you to be more on this side of things, which I think is a fair critique of media in general. But I guess maybe what's missing and what it comes down to is a little more media literacy, right? Like just in general for the public, which I think would be useful. I don't know. What do you think? Am I on fucking crack right now? What's going on?
I think
Mm-hmm.
it's almost a micro or macrocosm rather of what you just find with the social media sites in general. Like they're a cesspit unless you curate it. And I think there's plenty of content that doesn't feel the need to dip either way. There's also good content that dips both ways, I think. And I think when you speak of a healthy ecosystem, I think that is what you're looking for. You want a lot of neutrality. You want to also see things, you know, angling in different directions out from that neutrality, because I think it's important for the dialectic and for everything else to have that stuff going on.
Yeah, because I don't want just a bunch of like on the fencers, you know?
Yeah, for sure. But then you can be neutral without being a fence sitter, because you don't necessarily have to address the fence. You know, the fence isn't the be all and end all. Do you know what I mean? With Sterling stuff, and this is as someone who watches the Jimquisition every week, I can't help but think about the Black Mirror episode 50 Million Credits and the way that episode ends.
Which one's
when
that
I
one again?
see their work? That's the one where they're all on the bikes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe
like,
that's just my inherent nihilism, but I just think of that episode every time I watch one of the Jimquisitions, which is a shame. I think that maybe goes beyond the scope of this conversation, because that gets very heavy and very kind of sad. But
I know.
Ultimately, I think, we're in a good place. We're getting gradually to be in a better and better and better place. And I think it's a big tent, and it's only getting bigger. And I think the media landscape reflects that in a positive way. And hopefully as we go further and further, it can help to sort of enact more positive change. I think that's a tricky one, especially because what you're seeing is, and this I think speaks to what we sort of touched on in terms of the Twitch, you're seeing marketers wake up to that. And to talk about the Americanization, FTC regulations seem very sort of soft and cockeyed when it comes to how they address that stuff. And I think that's something where if things aren't cleaned up, they're going to be cleaned up for us, and I don't think that ends well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the next frontier if you want to talk about the current state.
Paula, why don't you go ahead? I had something and it left.
I didn't have anything,
Yeah.
so Paula.
Like I have a bunch of stuff left like here that I wanted to say. Like first of all, that the current state of the interest or of like I want to say like gaming coverage more than journalist.
Yeah, that's fair.
I really like how it is now because you find things from almost any perspective you would like to see things from, because a video game like in a series will feel different depending on if you played some games of the series or if you are new to the series. So there's and I know like especially like for like more, if you want to say like professional video game journalist, it's very important to have like game literacy. There's an argument to be said like for the people that aren't game literate, like how Rasputin on his series on how he very much like
gaming for non-gamers.
Gaming for not gamers, where his wife like pretty much like plays games for the first time, and he pretty much like notices things that you don't really think about, of how a non-gamer may want to do a thing and be unable to do the thing, or like how different games, like for someone who at least has played like a couple of games like growing up, would like, oh, if I move left, I could press A to jump or something like that. And so for someone who has never touched a controller, that doesn't really apply. So I think it's really important to try to see how a game would be seen as for someone who is just getting into the genre. Because believe it or not, there's people like that in the world. And I feel like game journalism in general is done for people that are already into video games, which I get. If you are like looking into reviews for a specific game, you probably already have some kind of knowledge about video games.
Well, yeah, because like, why would you become a journalist for games if you don't? You know what I mean? Yeah, that's part of the issue, right? Yeah.
But then again, the ecosystem feeds that. You know, you look at things like girlfriend reviews.
Yes,
for example.
I love girlfriend
reviews. Sorry, Paolo, crack on. I just wanted to throw that in there.
But yeah, like even I don't know, it's weird to say it, but like those out there reviewers who do this crazy stuff are very, very valuable from the point of a developer, because you know what stuff could have, you know, where a new player could get stuck in if you take into account like stuff like that. Like even like in some of our classes, we're told like, hey, you have to take into account like the existing controls for existing games of the genre you're trying to develop for, because otherwise you're just gonna confuse your players.
Yeah, you have to have a very good reason to break those conventions.
Don't make the X button the jump button, or I'll kill you.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're on PlayStation. The X
that's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Just remember that it's X on PlayStation, but not X on the Xbox. Actually, Paula, if I jump in, we're going to come back. I'm going to make sure you get all your points before the end of this. But I just wanted to also, because this is the point that your point reminded me of this, and yours as well, Rick, which I think maybe some of the complaints that I think could be in a constructive way is that right now I think there's a tension, and there's a tension in media in general about this. But like for video games, it's like, what is the purpose of the journalism, right? Is it to discuss the product and what the game is and like why one should play it? But then there's also the question of the industry, right? Like, how much do we talk about what's happening in the industry? Look at the Activision Blizzard shit, right? Like, holy Christ. Like, how much do we cover of this? How much do we put into discussing the lives of those who make games versus, I don't know, like the coverage itself of just the game itself versus the marketing, right? Like, it's like, where do all of these things fit together? And I think it's still something we're trying to figure out, right? Like, because
there's no easy answer. If there was,
Yeah.
we'd already have answered it.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, like, one of the things like most people do, or a lot of people do, is like separate like the game itself from the entity who develops it.
Mhm.
So even like with all the stuff going around with Activision and Blizzard, Diablo 2 remaster or remake or whatever, reignited. I don't know what. No,
Diablo 2 Reignited.
remake.
Yeah. I think it's called Reignited.
Yeah, Diablo. Whatever. The Diablo 2 remake is still gonna probably sell well because it is Diablo 2, regardless of everything that has been going on like in the background of everything. And the tricky thing is when the reviews come out, like let's say the game journalist reviews, do they just focus on the product or do they say anything about what happened?
Also,
Like what?
Sorry,
Yeah.
It's Diablo 2 Resurrected. Continue, sorry.
Resurrected. Thank you.
Are we even real gamers? What the fuck?
I'm not. Sorry. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Paula. And it's one that I do struggle with a bit because, like, everything is political, right? Like, that's like, we've talked about this before. And, you know, to not comment on it feels wrong, right? But then at the same time, it's also like, then there's people who made this game and they rely on it. And so, like, it's not easy.
And I was going to make exactly that point. You then run into a problem where you've got all these talented, passionate individuals being paid not nearly enough and working way too many hours to create these things that we love. And after years of hard work, we're just going to talk about some dickheads above them who've done some heinous things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult because then, like, financially, you're rewarding them if you ignore it, but you're also fucking over the people who actually make the damn thing if you don't. And there's no right answer.
Yeah.
But that's not unique to games.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we're grappling with those questions probably again speaks to the maturation of the press versus even 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
If I'm going to try and draw a positive from what is a holistically very negative situation.
Yeah. No, I know. Anyway, basically we're summing up with, like, it is fucking complicated. I'm
sorry, that's the most terrible, non-committal, completely non-like connected connection.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It was just crazy. Those listening.
Oh,
just, like,
bless you! You tried.
I tried real hard.
Okay, we're leaving that in. We just don't. Yeah.
Yeah. For those listening, there's a big thunderstorm that suddenly hit while we were recording, and I had to go close a window, or else I was going to get everything wet. And so I tried to come back, and it didn't work. But I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know, because like IGN and things, they'll cover these big important events, and it's like, I'm like, I think that's a good thing, right? Like games, because even when we play games, like games don't exist outside of. Like, they're not, you know what I mean? Like, they don't just appear, right? Like, people play games, people make games, right? And so there's that level. But then again, I don't know. I don't have the answer to this, and we're not going to come to the answer for this in this podcast, obviously. But, like, even things outside of games, like when the Black Lives Matter protests were hitting, it's like, how much do you cover on this? Because it is important, and it does affect those who are making games. And there's also this question of, like, if we're silent on it, are we complicit in it, right? And I don't know. Like, I'm like, to what extent? I'm not sure. Like, if I go and buy a fucking, I don't know. It's like, then again, this is sort of doomer shit, right? Like, I do feel like I'm a little bit like on the doomer train here, where I'm just like, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Is that what the Gen Zers are saying these days? You know what I mean? But
it's a deeply personal question. You come to your own conclusion. There is no right or wrong answer on that, ultimately, as far as I'm concerned. You know, like, yeah, I think maybe no, because to take there's no ethical consumption question a step further, it's not something that you have a choice in. So the ethics of it are almost a moot point. Like, with games, less so, but then games are an extension of, you've got to buy food, you've got to, you know, pay rent. There's exploitation and suffering and harm done in all of those. You know, you're a part of the game. You can't abdicate responsibility playing in the game. You can't opt not to play. You just have to choose how to best play it to fit with your own morality and everything else. Because that's based on your perception and your worldview and what you what you decide is and isn't acceptable. That's always going to be a deeply personal question with a deeply personal answer.
Yeah, I think what I might add, like just my little din on this, and then Paolo, I want you to take it away with your points, is that, because I know you have extras too, I think the issues within game development should be routinely examined and brought up so that we can't forget it, right? Because I know we talk about like games as escapism, but yeah, I think it's a duty of game journalists to make sure we don't forget this, right? Because like, and because then you can go play your game and you won't notice. But like, as you're getting this stuff, I think, yeah, there's an importance that because it's like once we forget and once we let it slip, it becomes even harder for like those who are in those industries to like get traction. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, there is something to be said for maybe not us as consumers. Like, I don't know. Look, fucking, when you try to boycott shit, I don't know if that has ever worked. Maybe it has. I don't think I've seen much of it ever having much of an effect. But like, when developers are able to, put pressure on their companies because, news media and everyone is talking about this shit, things can happen, right? And like things do move for the better. So like, I think maybe that's where I stand on that. I think, it's
Tyler, you were midway through some things.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, definitely like, whatever happens during development, it should be covered. And not only because of, unethical shit happening, but also because of the developers making the games. Like, you don't want your like brilliant individuals that probably have like a lot of ideas and a lot of love for the medium be burned out on it or like get sick of it because of the companies they work for. You don't want you don't want creators being overworked or like putting your crunch and stuff like that, because that is just terrible. That will burn you out. Like,
but so long as there's fresh graduates, they're not going to feel the burn. Sorry, go on.
Though, but
but you don't want to you don't want to kill the artist's creativity or the developer's creativity or their love for what they do. That's the thing. Like, and that's talking from the point of view of someone who wants to get into game development. Like, I don't want to go to a company.
I think that's the
and
crux
get
of the problem.
Smashed like a bag or something like that, and not being able to do anything. I don't want to get
the wrong
exploited.
side of the pyramid. It's
but
they're seeing the bottom line. They're not seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah. This is the nice perspective, though, that Paolo, you provide too, because like you're someone who wants to get into this industry. So it's like Rick's here. Rick is like the strict gamer, not doing the artistic side. Gamer with the artist, and gamer going. I'm just.
Yeah, I bet there's more nuance than that.
There's way more nuance, but I just mean like our perspectives. Do you know what I mean? Like I think they provide. I hope they're interesting. Sorry, Paolo, keep going. Yeah.
But yeah, like that's the thing. Like, I don't want to go into a workplace which is gonna make me hate the entire work, and that sometimes does get reflected on the final piece of work. But that's the thing. Like, if we want to keep having video games or creative stuff or all these stuff, we have to take into account that the developers want to have a safe workplace too. Like, you don't want them to go through shit. They're human beings. Like, I know, like all the stuff that's going on, like in the video game, all the stuff that is going on, like with the I can't speak today. All the stuff that is going on in the video game industry, like for the developers, I know there are like common things on work or like some work environments, doesn't mean they are good. Jumping like back into like the game themselves, like I'm like on the fence too, in the sense of does a game deserve to be reviewed on because of the shit they do, like way up in the ladder there, or do you try to support the developers, or what the fuck you do? You'll never know.
Yeah. God damn it.
No.
None of this is easy.
None of this is easy. Well, the very least, how the like video game media or their media coverage is going, it is going to a good place, I think. Not only because you get like to know like what is going on behind the scenes, and people get to fight for pretty much the rights behind the scenes, but going back to video games, you get to know more games because there are people like who like to cover like these smaller games that otherwise wouldn't really like catch up. Like even the Five Nights at Freddy's, for example. That game was probably popular only because some big YouTubers covered it.
Yeah, for better or worse on that one.
For better or worse on that.
I'm not sure if you know how like relevant Five Nights at Freddy's specifically is to this whole. I think Alex does because he's grinning at me.
A little bit, yeah. I'm not like super versed on it right now, but I know some stuff on it, yeah. But you're right, Paula.
And also there are like besides like the big YouTubers who cover games and pretty much like people flock those games, there are other YouTubers like Splattercat Gaming who pretty much like does a little like sample play of whatever indie game he finds online. And Slime Rancher, I found out about Slime Rancher because of that guy. Or like what was the name? The game where it's a city builder with beavers that I cover like back on some Steam festival thingy.
I know what you mean. Is it Beaverbrook?
And no, but a city builder with beavers, like even stuff like that. Like there are so many creative smaller developers that are making some real hidden gems that deserve to be shown to the world.
Timberborn,
yeah. Timberborn, yeah.
Sorry, we really wanted to know what that is. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Anyway,
so yeah, like the way the industry is growing, not only you get like more perspectives on everything, you get more of everything. You get more information, for better or for worse. So yeah, that were the points I wanted to make.
Nice.
And that's probably a perfect time to shout out. I think you guys both know about them. There's a YouTube channel called NoClip.
Oh, that's great,
it's run by a guy called Danny O'Dwyer, who has been a journalist in the industry for like over a decade. Packed it all in to set up this company to do like long form documentary content on past and current video games. They like followed Hades' development all the way through. There's like a feature-length documentary's worth of footage that they've put out. Truly excellent stuff, and another string to the media bow.
Yeah. YouTube's really, really diversified how this all works, and I guess technically we're part of it now. Like we're
in some small,
in a very small way, we're media covering games, right? And that's the thing that I maybe to put like a bow on some of this too. It's like just spending a bit of time, like look up. There are lots of actually really good even just videos on media literacy and stuff too, and like recognizing that like journalism versus media are like it's different things, right? And so like and like just because a company does journalism doesn't mean it can't also do other things, right? Other types of media. They're going to do multiple different types. And it's like being able to distinguish between the advertisement and this and that, which maybe some companies need to be more explicit in that, which I think people are getting better at doing that. But yeah, I mean, I'd almost say that like, it'd be nice if we had a bit more of a consensus on some of the words for things, reviews and retrospectives and previews and all this stuff. Like it'd be nice if previews were even just called ads for the game. Because half the time that's what they are, but they're not always. But but I think companies are getting pretty good at also saying, they're like, hey, this is the build this company gave us. This is what we've seen of this game. Be aware that this is about 5 hours of some random shit that we played that we have no idea if this is what the game will be like in the end, but here's what we saw.
Yeah, and also we saw it at this event where they brought us and wined and dined us or not.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're pretty good at that these days, if you actually read their articles, right? Which not a lot of people do, though. Unfortunately, we have a lot of headlines.
I thought it was just a headline. Is it not going to admit something like that?
Aren't you supposed to just read the headline and then leave an angry comment? Yes. That's what we should title this one.
Leave an angry comment.
Yeah, read the title.
Leave
an
an
angry
angry comment.
Anyway, those are some of our very all over the place thoughts on journalism and media coverage when it comes to games. I don't know. Let us know what you think. If you agree with us, or if you think of some excellent thing or excellent new point that you want to bring up, let us know.
And because I feel like we've got some more in the tank on this topic, in fairness. If there's stuff you think we didn't cover that you'd like to hear us cover on this or on another New Game Plus, on anything really, we'd love to know.
Yeah.
Give us the engagement. Feed the algorithm.
Feed the gods. Alrighty. Well, that's it. Toodles, folks.
Peace.
Bye.
Nice.